Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay? Oh, echo. Let me fix. There we go. Okay. Alrighty. Looks like we got a couple people with us. Anybody else want to say hello? We've got a little bit long, but a lot of great information today. It's Genesis. Really, just the whole thing is just one of those books that you're just like. I think the first time that anybody reads through it, they're just like, why the heck do I need to read this? Like, why do I need to know this? I keep saying that, but like, it's so true. But as you take the opportunity to do the research and dig a little deeper, it's really fascinating what you find. So I'm hoping that you'll find some of the stuff that I found today pretty fascinating as well. I had said in Discord, I got out so I have two study Bibles. I've showed you this one, the Quest Study Bible. It's in NIV and it is by Vondervan. It is by far my favorite. And it's like a life application kind of notes and everything, and just very straight to the point, breaking things down. Super awesome. Excuse me. And then the other one that I broke out today, because of the stories that we're going to go through, are very controversial in this, not necessarily just in this day and age, but back then it was, it's a really good example of how some of the laws, some of the things that are legal within a culture's legal system, things that are deemed appropriate based on culture, are not necessarily going to be okay in God's eyes. They're not okay biblically, right? So today, the story that we're going to go through is very much that theme, where you see that it's like, a lot of people kind of point out some of the stories in the Bible and they're like, well, that was okay. That was, this person did this in the Bible, so that must be okay for me, or, things like that. And I feel like this is kind of one of those stories. So, and it relates very much to, well, it relates to anybody, but specifically, like, as a woman, it was one of those stories that I was like, wow, this is interesting. um, and so I whipped out my women's study Bible, and this is in the New King James Version, and it is a Thomas Nelson women's study Bible, and it is amazing if you are a woman like me. This is one that I highly, highly recommend. I'll show you. I don't know if you can see it. I highly, highly recommend this one. It is amazing. And I actually really like that it's in the New King James Version. I've said this before. I really like multiple translations, but this has it has specific notes in it and breakdowns um, and different variables in here that explain stories as they relate to women. And it's not really just important for women to understand in that term, but I think that it's important for everybody to read it in that perspective. And the same goes for men's study Bibles. My boyfriend has a men's study Bible, and it has the same kind of stuff, kind of targeted towards men, but it's valuable for you to read and understand both sides of it. But anyway, so I broke out this today because of the stories that we're going through. So I'm going to read a little bit from both of them today. We might be a little long. I'll try not to, but there's a lot of this is one of those opportunities where we're going to be able to kind of learn a lot as we go along. And I might end up doing it a little bit differently because there's just so much to it. Excuse me. and we are going through 3 chapters today. Oh, excuse me, my goodness. Great, I'm already hiccuping. Okay. And Jay Villers, I know you haven't gone through it yet. I hope that that my pace is okay for you to keep up. And we'll try to break this down as we go along. So we're going to start with Genesis 14. And I'm going to have my Bibles open, and there's a couple of points that I'm going to kind of stop. I'm going to kind of stop and reference the notes as we go along, because there's so many points that I think are very important, and it's just, again, an opportunity for us to learn as we go. And if we swing back around, we may miss something. So I want to try to cross-reference as we go along here. All right. At the time when Amraphel was king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, bear with me on these names, Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goyim, these kings went to war against Bera, king of Sodom, Bishra, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar. All these latter kings joined forces in the valley of Siddim, that is the Dead Sea Valley. For 12 years they had been subject to Kedorlaomer, but in the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year, Kedorlaomer and the kings allied with him went out and defeated the Rephaites in Ashtaroth. Oh my gosh, these names. Karnaim, the Zezites. Oh my gosh, the Zuzites in Ham, the Emites in Shaveh Kiriathaim, and the Horites in the hill country of Seir, as far as El Paran near the desert. Then they turned back and went to En-Mishpat, that is Kadesh, it's a name I recognize, and they conquered the whole territory of the Amalekites, as well as the Amorites, who were living in Hazezon Tamar. Then the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar, marched out and drew up their battle lines in the valley of Siddim against Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, Tidal, king of Goyim, Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings against 5. Now the valley of Siddim was full of tar pits, and when the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, some of the men fell into them, and the rest fled to the hills. So that was a mouthful. I did not expect you to keep up with that. So basically, we have all these kings, all these kingdoms. They were some of these kingdoms were basically oppressed. They rebelled after 13 years. In the 14th year, they rebelled. They fought back, and then when the kingdoms, oh my gosh, I'm getting them all backwards now. Yes, kingdoms of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. Right, so they gave up, and I think we all kind of recognize Sodom and Gomorrah. We'll learn more about that as we go along. The kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, and they fell into tar pits, and then fled into the hills, right? So they gave up. The 4 kings seized all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their food. Then they went away. They also carried off Abram's nephew Lot and his possessions, since he was living in Sodom. If you remember from yesterday, Lot decided that he was going to separate himself from Abram and his tribe, his, whole deal. There was too many people, too much going on for the land that they were on, so Lot decided to leave, and he ended up claiming some land right outside of Sodom, right? So he was basically within that kingdom now. And Sodom, if you remember, Sodom and Gomorrah are known for being very unclean, right? They're very vile. There's a lot of really, really sinful behavior happening in Sodom and Gomorrah, right? That's what they're famous for. So when Sodom was overtaken, Lot was there, and he was taken too, right? So him and everything that he owned was taken from him because he was in Sodom. Okay. Okay. A man who had escaped came and reported this to Abram the Hebrew. So somebody from Lot's camp escaped and went straight to Abram and told him, "Hey, Lot has been captured. Lot and his whole deal has been captured." Now Abram was living near the great trees of Mamre the Amorite, a brother of Eshcol and Aner, all of whom were allied with Abram. When Abram heard that his relative had been taken captive, he called out the 318 trained men born in his household and went in pursuit as far as Dan. During the night, Abram divided his men to attack them, and he routed them, pursuing them as far as Hobah, north of Damascus, which I want to point out, I think is really funny. Damascus is a city that is used in a lot of the Final Fantasy games. And hey, we're a gaming group, so I got to point that out. I'm total nerd fact right there. I love finding those little things, don't you? And we keep finding that along ESO too. All the little things, all the little biblical places and names and everything. It's pretty neat. So anyway, so basically, the kingdoms that captured Sodom and Gomorrah, they captured Lot, right? Noah heard about Lot getting captured. He went out and he attacked them after they had just captured these cities, okay? He recovered all the goods and brought back his relative Lot and his possessions together with the women and the other people. After Abram returned from defeating Kedorlaomer and the kings allied with him, the king of Sodom came out to meet him in the valley of Shaveh, that is the king's valley. So Sodom and Gomorrah and these other kingdoms, they were defeated, right? They were defeated, and then they were overtaken by these other kingdoms. These kingdoms that took over Sodom and Gomorrah. They took all their stuff. They took all their people. They took everything. Then Abram comes in, attacks, and beats them, and takes everything, right? So then the king of Sodom is like, whoa, he just beat these guys that just destroyed us. So he comes to Abram, okay, and that's where we're at here. So he comes to Abram, and then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High, and he blessed Abram, saying, "Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and praise be to God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hand." oh gosh, excuse me. Then Abram gave him a tenth of everything. I'm going to stop here for just a moment. Two important pieces right here that are very interesting. So Melchizedek, king of Salem. So it says he was priest of God Most High. So what the heck does that mean? I thought this was very interesting. Melchizedek was a Canaanite priest king, one of the most intriguing persons in the Bible. We know little about him, but the writer of Hebrews used him as a type of Christ, perhaps even as a pre-incarnate Christ. He may illustrate that even in a pagan world, God can speak to sincere hearts. So if there's anybody that you want to find out a little bit more about, it's this guy. Like, I want to learn more about this guy. What the heck is obviously he's significant, but I'm really interested to find out more about him. So this guy's basically a bigwig. And then the next point is Abram gave him a tenth of everything. This is significant. This is not just, oh, hey, we beat the people who beat you up. Here's some of the loot, right? That's not what this is. It totally seems like that right off the bat, but that's not what this is. This is the first mention of tithing in the Bible because this guy is like a priest king, right? So they treated him as a Christ incarnate or pre-incarnate. He gave him a tenth of everything. What are we called to do for God? Give him a tenth of what we earn. Melchizedek was a prominent king in the region and a priest of God Most High. When Abram gave him a tenth, it was a sign of his gratitude to God and a sign that he had submitted to Melchizedek and would not compete with him. So I thought that was really cool. This is the first place that we see tithing in the Bible. Okay, so we'll keep going here. Okay. The king of Sodom said to Abram, "Give me the people and keep the goods for yourself." But Abram said to the king of Sodom, "With raised hand I have sworn an oath to the Lord, God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, that I will accept nothing belonging to you, not even a thread or the strap of a sandal, so that you will never be able to say, 'I made Abram rich.' I will accept nothing but what my men have eaten and the share that belongs to the men who went with me, to Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre. Let them have their share." And so why would Abram refuse to take the goods? Obviously, I mean, he says part of it right here. He doesn't want anybody to say, "Hey, this guy is why Abram is rich," right? That glory needs to go to God. It always needs to go to God. This is Abram trusting God, right? He's saying, "Nope, I'm not going to take any of this. Giving this back over to them. They can take their share. They're taken care of, but I'm going to let God take care of me." And so later on, Abram is going to be rewarded by God for not taking this. But also, if you think about it, one thing that I was thinking about is he doesn't want to take anything from Sodom, right? All of these things came from, well, not all, but a lot of this stuff came from Sodom. Sodom is known to be a dirty place. Would you want to take things, if you're Abram, if you are somebody who is so highly esteemed, like Abram, you are a righteous person, faithful to God, trusting God, would you want to be known as somebody who takes from those who are very unholy? Probably not. So I think that's also part of this. Is that necessarily correct? No, but it's really, that's kind of a speculation there. But I think it makes sense. Okay. So that's what we got for 14. 15, we're going to continue on. Do you have any questions on 14? I know we're going a little differently than normal. Okay. Okay. Oh, one thing too that I forgot to mention yesterday, but it comes up multiple times here, and I think is really important, just kind of overall as people who have a relationship with God, or as anybody who's maybe not at that point of being able to recognize when God is speaking to you. I want to point out that multiple different ways is it described that God comes to or speaks to Abram. Um, for example, right here, we're about to read, after this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, right? In other places, it is like the Lord walks with Abram, the Lord came to Abram, the Lord spoke to Abram. Like it's in so many different ways, and it's important to recognize and understand that the Lord will talk to you and try to communicate something to you in many different ways. It will not be the same way every time. God has to get our attention in multiple different ways. So I know that that's one thing that you don't always necessarily understand until you experience it yourself. So I really think that that's something important to point out. One way is, if you if you feel something weighing heavy on your heart, that could very likely be God trying to tell you something. If you can't get an image out of your head about something, that might be God talking to you. You could have a dream, and it could mean, God is trying to tell you something. There's so many different ways that God can speak to you. Excuse me, gosh. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And it's just important to understand that it's not just one solid way. Nobody's going to experience it the same way. And you're not going to experience it the same way every time either. And I love that that is a theme here with Abram, is that God approaches him many different ways. So that's important to understand and to recognize. So as you go through this yourself and as you continue on, kind of look for that. Look for that terminology that is used. When anywhere in scripture it is talking about how God approaches somebody or communicates with somebody, and just kind of pay a little extra attention to that and kind of see that there are so many differences there. And I just think that that's very, very important. After this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. I love that. And another translation is, I am your sovereign. Your very great shield or reward will be very great. Interesting. Oops, there we go. But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus? And Abram said, You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. Want to stop right there and address that. We're gonna stop and go a few times here so I can explain a few things that are very significant. This is a huge cultural piece. There's a lot of cultural information in here that I want to explain that will help kind of make sense of the whole overall story here. So, if a family, if a couple, husband and a wife, do not have any children, to continue their line, it was common, and it was a very culturally normal thing for them to pick a servant and have them inherit everything from their family. So they inherit everything, they take their name, so basically they adopt them. They take their name, they inherit everything, they take care of them before they die, right? So they become like their child. So again, it's like adopting them, so that that person can carry on the name and the legacy of that family. Um, so that's why that's why he's saying, you have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. You might be wondering, why would he not choose Lot? Lot is his nephew, which is actually why Lot is not going to take the inheritance. He's not the heir. Lot is the heir to his father. There cannot be an heir to multiple families, right? So Lot cannot be the heir of Abram and the heir of his father, right? Which his father was Haran. So Lot is the heir of Haran. He cannot also be the heir of Abram. Okay, that was not okay back then. So Abram would have to pick a servant, and he picked his servant. This is who it would have been, and he would have been adopted and given the inheritance. Okay. Then the word of the Lord came to him, "This man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir." He took him outside and said, "Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them." Then he said to him, "So shall your offspring be." He's telling him, you will have as many offspring as there as stars in the sky. You won't be able to count them. And offspring also would mean like more generations, not just like he's gonna have so many kids that, himself, that there's you can't count them all. That's a lot of kids for one person to have. Abram believed the Lord, and he created it to him as righteousness. And that right there is actually a good example. That's significant. It's a good example of, I don't know how he's going to do it. I don't know how God's going to do it. I don't know what the plan is, but I'm going to trust God that what he says is true and that he will follow through, right? He also said to him, "I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to take possession of it." But Abram said, "Sovereign Lord, how can I know that I will gain possession of it?" So the Lord said to him, "Bring me a heifer, a goat, and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon." And this contradictory is a good example that it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to question the Lord. If you have questions, let's put it this way. God already knows that you have the question. He already knows that you're questioning him, so why don't you just bring it to him? You know what I mean? Like, it's okay. Just be honest about the questions that you have, and if you bring it to the Lord, he's going to give you wisdom about it. He's going to answer you in his way. But suppressing your questions and just acting like they aren't there, or just struggling with it in your own mind, that's not going to help you. God already knows that it's there, and he wants you to bring those questions to him, right? Don't be afraid to ask God the questions that you have. Even if you feel like it's questioning him, it's okay. He knows you have the question. Just bring it to him. He'll help you through it. Abram brought all these to him, cut them in two, and arranged the halves opposite each other. The birds, however, he did not cut in half. Then birds of prey came down on the carcasses, but Abram drove them away. As the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. Then the Lord said to him, "Know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and that they will be enslaved and mistreated there. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. You, however, will go to your ancestors in peace and be buried at a good old age." In the 4th generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. Okay, so another couple points here. So the animals, and we'll kind of find out a little bit more about this in a moment. Why cut animals in half? This formalized a covenant made between individuals in that culture. Other ancient literature tells of killing and dividing animals so that the parties to the covenant could walk between the body parts, signifying that a similar fate should come on whoever broke the contract. It amounted to an oath solemnized by the sacrifice of the animal. So Abram took these animals, God told him to take these animals, he cut them in half, right? So he had these animals, he got the head over here and the butt over here, and he got some space in between them, and he put all these animals here, and this is signifying a covenant that is being made between him and God, right? And we'll find out a little bit more about this in a moment. And then, why wait for the Amorites' sin to increase? God's compassion made him slow to act in judgment. He would not take the land from the Amorites, or the Canaanites, and give it to Abram's descendants without first giving the Amorites every chance to repent. A holy God deals with people in a fair and patient manner. This is also relevant because these are, again, the Canaanites, and the Canaanites are cursed and destined to be overtaken by the Hebrews. Who's the Hebrew? Abram. Abram is the Hebrew. His descendants are the Hebrews. The Amorites are the Canaanites. The Canaanites were cursed and said to be eventually overcome and taken over by the Hebrews. So this is part of that whole previous story that we've already read. It all ties together. But God is giving them a chance to do the right thing, knowing that unfortunately they're not going to, but I'm still going to give them a chance anyway, right? That's what he does. Oh my gosh. He gives us a chance to do the right thing, and when we don't, then he'll do something about it, right? So he's giving the Amorites a chance. Okay. When the sun had set and darkness had fallen, a smoking fire pot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces, the two animal halves. So you've got all the animal pieces, and this fireball basically forms and goes down the middle of the animal carcasses that are laid out. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram and said, "To your descendants I give this land, from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, Kenizzites, Cadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephaites, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, and Jezebites." That's a lot of ites. So another significant piece here is the flaming ball of fire going down the middle of the carcasses. What the heck is that? So throughout Scripture, fire, especially like fire that just mystically appears, is typically a representation of God, right? This puts it this way. Why send a blazing torch through the pieces? It can be likened to God's signature on the contract. Fire in the Bible is a consistent symbol of God's very presence. Another example is the burning bush, which I think we all at least know a little bit about the burning bush story. Okay. And one thing additional that I want to point out in 15 here, I thought this was a really important note here. The Bible makes Abram's faith the model for us all. The surprising thing is that Abram never saw a Bible, had no church, possessed no creed, took no sacrament, heard not even one of the 10 Commandments, and perhaps knew little about life after death. Yet Abram's faith shows us what really matters. He heard the voice of God and dared to believe he could trust God when God spoke. He risked his life, his security, his reputation, his future, and even his son, later on the word that came from the God whom he could not see, but in whom he believed. Can anything better demonstrate that it is by faith and faith alone that we are saved? Today we have the Bible, the church, the creeds, the sacraments, and the 10 Commandments, but God still looks for one essential: faith that trusts Him completely. And if you take nothing away from any of the stories of Abram or Abraham, if you haven't clicked that one yet, Abram is Abraham, and Sarai is Sarah and Abraham. If you take nothing but one thing away, it's that Abraham had nothing but his faith to go on and lead him to God, right? And that's just so powerful. Above anything else that God asked from us is just our faith. Oh, excuse me. Okay, making sure I didn't miss any notes here. How we doing? Still doing all right? Keeping up with me okay? Got so much information today. Okay. And I know we're going a little long on time. I hope you're doing okay on the time with me. 16 is fairly short. We've got just a couple of things left here. Okay. So now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her." What the heck, right? If you're anything like me, I read this and was like, what? What is happening right now? Don't worry. Yeah, whip out that women's Bible I was talking about. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to keep reading a little bit. We're going to read a little further, and then I've got a few notes for us. But this story is definitely a WTF story, and you're like, what is happening? Like, why, right? And I'll break it down a little bit for you. I'm not saying that it's necessarily all okay, but I'll break it down for you and make some sense of it. Okay. Abram agreed to what Sarai said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian slave Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. Another word for that is concubine. He slept with Hagar and she conceived. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress, Sarai. Then Sarai said to Abram, "You are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me." "Your slave is in your hands," Abram said. "Do with her whatever you think best." Then Sarai mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road of Shur. And he said, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? Oh, excuse me. I'm running away from my mistress Sarai, she answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, Go back to your mistress and submit to her. The angel added, I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too many or too numerous to count. The angel of the Lord also said to her, You are now pregnant, and you will give birth to a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility toward all his brothers. She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me. For she said, I have now seen the one who sees me. That is why the well was called Bir Lahai Roi. It is still there between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram gave the name Ishmael to the son she had born. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael. So the name of this well they're talking about, it translates to living one who sees me. That's what the name of the well was called. It's pretty cool. Okay. So, break that down a little bit for us. Sarai, or Sarah, cannot have children, right? She has not had a baby yet. So, she tells Abram, here's my slave. Take her, make her your concubine or your second wife, and have some kids with her, right? I can't give you kids. You need kids. Go have some kids with this chick, okay? Abraham does it. She gets pregnant. She has a son. Names him Ishmael. Okay? What the heck? Why is this happening? So, in the culture back then, it was normal and it was legal for if you don't have children, if you and your wife, your man and your wife can't have kids, then you would pick one of your wife's servants, or she would pick one of her servants, and they would become like a surrogate for this family. So any children that the servant woman has legally actually becomes their child, like Abram's and Sarai's child. So any children that Hagar has legally are actually Sarai or Sarah and Abraham's children, right? It's not, she doesn't have any legal right to the child. This was very, very normal and legal in this culture back then. If they can't have kids together, then somebody else, another woman, will come in and have babies for them. But it's also a form of polygamy, which, as we know, is definitely against God's plan for marriage, right? And plan for sex and all of it, right? That's totally not okay. Just because they did this does not mean that it is okay. And this is an example of one of the stories in the Bible where the cultural norm and the legal system of that culture does not coincide with scripture. It doesn't coincide with God's laws, right? This is not, just because it's okay culturally doesn't mean that it's okay with God. So, just one. Okay, so then Um, God reached out to Hagar through the angel and told her basically like, you're gonna have this baby, this is what you're gonna name them, this is what's gonna happen for you, basically I'm gonna bless you, you're gonna have a big family, you're gonna have a lot of descendants, but I need you to go back, you need to go back, and you're gonna suffer and it's gonna suck basically, but I need you to do this, and then I'm gonna do this for you, right? And that in itself is an example of, you know what, your situation kind of sucks, sorry about that, but I have a better future for you. I have a better plan for you. There's more, there's better things coming, but you're gonna have to suffer for a while. You're gonna have to go through this, and then it's gonna get better later, right? And there's so many of those stories throughout the Bible. This is one of them. It's gonna suck. You're not gonna like it, right? You may have acted poorly. This situation is not ideal, but it's going to get better later, right? If you just get through it and just do what God tells you to do, get through it, and God will bless you. So basically, the story is not one of those stories where it's like, oh, all these people did some really sketchy stuff and it's totally acceptable. No, it's one of those stories where these people did some really crappy stuff and it was okay culturally. So there was no cultural community consequences, but we find out later some of the consequences that happen, and some of the actual plans that God has, where like God has a funny way of making things happen sometimes. And then one more little section here I want to read on the notes. I know we are running really long. I'm sorry. Are you still doing okay on time? We've got just a couple more minutes, I promise. But it's good stuff. This is probably my favorite part of the whole reading today. Okay. So I'm just going to read this little part here. And I hope that this says something for you. To this fugitive slave, God revealed himself. In tender grace, he met her immediate need and allowed her to experience his presence. Hagar's legacy speaks poignantly to the growing number of disadvantages and dispossessed women. Under no circumstance can they escape God's care. As God provided for Hagar, he can and will provide for every woman. Throughout Hagar's life, she experienced estrangement and prejudice as a foreigner, hardship and abuse as a servant, grief and abandonment as an unwed pregnant woman, and hopeless despair on 2 occasions as she faced imminent death. Yet despite all these difficulties, Hagar responded to the God who addressed her. She did not get compensation from Sarah and Abraham. Her life was never easy, but God did reward her. In the all-seeing God, Hagar found refuge and life. So, no matter how crappy your situation is, no matter how bad it feels, no matter what abuse you may go through, God will take care of you. Just look to him, trust in him, and God will take care of you. And this is just such a beautiful example of that. I love the way that it puts this. Her life was never easy, but God did reward her. In the all-seeing God, Hagar found refuge in life. And that's just so important to remember. You can find refuge and life in God no matter what your circumstances are, no matter what you are suffering, no matter what you are struggling with. no matter what, you can find refuge and life in God. You just have to trust him. You just have to have faith. That's all he really asks for, is just to trust him, have faith in him, and he will provide that refuge and that life for you. So, yes, we went very long today. But I am really hoping that you got some good out of this. Oh, and you know what? One last note that I wanted to just say. I think one of my other biggest takeaways was, uh, God will not let our attempts to make our own security to thwart his plans for us. His plan will win every time. So when we try to make our plans work, and we aren't patient for God's plan, or we don't listen to God's plan, tough luck. God's plan is still going to win. You're wasting your effort. So just try to make sure your focus is on his plan, and don't try to pass over his plan, because it's gonna win. It's gonna win. So, I hope that spoke to you today. There's just so much in this today that just really was kind of mind-blowing. And I would love to close in prayer. Again, I'm so bad at opening with prayer, but I would love to close in prayer with this session today. So if you want to pray with me. Dear God, thank you so much, God, for all of your wisdom and all of the just beautiful stories and history that we get to learn about. And God, just thank you so much for giving us this information and leading us through it and helping us to find the significance, and even just the tedious stories that just are so kind of mind-numbing at first, but when you open our eyes, and we let you to open our eyes and open our hearts and our minds, I mean, it's just incredible, the information that we get to learn and take away from this history, because they are not just stories, it is our history. And God, just thank you so much for creating the world that you created and creating us the way that you have. And God, I look forward to continuing on in this plan, and just growing with your people and with you. And God, just please bless us and guide us, and just help us to always just hear from you. And those who do watch with me, help them to hear from you, not from me, and help me to say what you need me to say. And God, just thank you so much for all the blessings that you provide, and thank you so much for just everything. Thank you so much, God, in your name. Amen. Thank you so much for joining us today. I will look forward to tomorrow. I'm so sorry for being so long. Good thing you're home today, right? But I will look forward to tomorrow, and I hope you feel better. Oh, hi! Hey! I caught the tail end, didn't you, Cold? Aw, well, you'll have to join me. I do these every morning. 9:30 is usually when we start. We went quite a bit longer than normal today, but I would love for you guys to join me. Nice. Well, definitely join me any morning. We do Monday through Friday. We do 9:30 to about 10 usually. So definitely pop on and join us any morning. We would love to have you in. We're going through a chronological Bible reading plan. And we're doing like a deep dive into it, so we get a lot more out of it. And just trying to pick out all the pieces, finding significance, like cultural significance, and just all the ins and outs. So it's been really fun so far. I would love for you to join us anytime. But Awesome. So yeah, we're just finished up today though. But if you want to join, if you want to see like what we're up to, I did actually find, I'm still figuring out this whole Twitch thing. I discovered that I can get the videos, the streams directly from Twitch to YouTube. So all the previous ones were only like a week in. Um, so there's not a ton to catch up on if you would like to go back and see what we've been doing. They are all on YouTube, which I will have to actually link. I don't think I have, excuse me, I don't think I have the YouTube on here, but um, the YouTube has all the previous ones, and I'll continue to do that. And then if you want to hop into our Discord, you can too. Got lots of good stuff there. But and then the plan, if you want to check that out, we use Bible.com, and you can link to the plan in the Twitch here. So there's a join us in our current plan little link here if you want to check that out. But yay! Well, glad you caught the tail end of that, and maybe you'll get to join us moving forward. Okay. You too. Have a good one. Sure, I'll talk to you later. Bye.